A soft melody drifted through the Victorian house as Olivia Patterson carefully fastened her pearl necklace, the one Charles had given her on their 30th anniversary. The face in the mirror showed a woman of 68 lines, etched by years of joy and sorrow, but with eyes that held a fire that surprised even her. Today was her son's wedding day, but instead of anticipation, she felt a growing sense of dread. "Today is the day," she whispered to Charles's photograph on her nightstand. "You always said there would come a time when silence would no longer serve me. I believe that time has arrived." The day was strangely beautiful, with sunlight filtering through the Spanish moss that draped the oak trees outside her window. Savannah in June was always humid, but today the air felt electric, charged with the promise of confrontation. As she closed the front door of her Victorian home, she paused to look back at the entryway, with its polished hardwood and the staircase Charles had restored by hand. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was she doing the right thing? Would this destroy any chance of reconciliation with Marcus? But then she remembered Audrey's cold threat from their last conversation. A few doctor's notes are enough for a judge to say you can't make decisions. Her resolve hardened. She locked the door and walked to her old Ford. Whatever happened today, she would face it with her dignity intact. As she waited for Raymond, memories pulled her back 2 years to the day Marcus introduced Audrey. She remembered that afternoon so clearly, the Georgia sun shining on the porch, Charles's rocking chair still in place, and the simple dinner she had prepared, fried chicken, collard greens, and sweet potato pie Marcus had loved since childhood. She wanted their first meal in her home to be warm and welcoming. But the moment Audrey stepped inside, Olivia sensed something wrong. She glanced around the living room, her eyes betraying disdain. The antique sofa with its faded floral pattern, the scratched coffee table Charles had repaired countless times in Audrey's eyes, they were outdated, shameful. "Oh, this place is cozy," she said with a thin smile, her tone like a needle piercing Olivia's heart. Marcus, too busy carrying luggage, didn't notice the sarcasm. He beamed proudly. "Mom, this is Audrey. I really hope you two get along." Olivia extended her hand, forcing a smile. Audrey's hand was cold, her handshake limp, and within seconds, she pulled away to adjust her sparkling necklace. Olivia knew right then that Audrey was the kind of woman used to bright lights and luxury, not the salt-tinged simplicity of her historic Savannah home. Dinner was far from warm. Audrey picked at her food, barely ate, and sipped water repeatedly. When Olivia asked about her family, she brushed it off. "My parents run businesses, nothing special." But when the subject shifted to money, her eyes lit up with curiosity, sharp enough to make Olivia shiver. "How do you manage on just a teacher's pension? It must be hard living alone in this big house, right?" The question cut like a knife. Olivia forced a smile and answered simply, "I get by. It's enough." That night, after cleaning up, Olivia sat by the window, staring at the moonlight casting shadows from the ancient oak tree in her yard. Unease rose within her, not just because of Audrey's tactless words, but because of Marcus's silence, as if he were mesmerized by her presence. Her once attentive, sensitive son now felt like a stranger. In the months that followed, every visit brought more subtle jabs. When Audrey saw Olivia in her old floral dress, she chuckled. "Don't you have anything more modern? People your age dress much younger these days." Or when Olivia drove them to Forsyth Park in her Ford, Audrey sneered, "Is this car even safe anymore? Shouldn't you upgrade?" Marcus didn't defend her. Instead, he echoed Audrey's sentiments. "Mom, maybe she's right. At your age, safety matters more." His words pierced deeper than Audrey's. He no longer knew the difference between genuine concern and disguised insult. Once when Olivia mentioned her part-time piano lessons at the community center, Audrey sighed audibly. "At your age, you should be resting. Why are you still working? Strange." That sentence lodged in Olivia's mind. They wanted her to believe she was useless, that she should give up everything, her house, her assets, her right to decide, and let them take over. She chose to stay quiet, telling herself maybe she was being too sensitive. Maybe Audrey was just clumsy with her words. But as time passed, she realized those remarks weren't accidental. They were tiny knives, one cut at a time, aimed at her self-respect. A year passed and Marcus depended on Audrey more and more. He started cutting Olivia off during conversations, giving her annoyed looks whenever she offered an opinion. Worst of all, he gradually looked down on the house he grew up in, the home Charles and Olivia had devoted their lives to maintaining. Olivia remembered one evening on the porch, the two of them sitting together while she served sweet tea. Audrey held a real estate magazine pointing at luxury oceanfront condos. "Marcus, see, these places are so much more modern than your mom's old house." Marcus nodded without protest. Olivia looked at her son, hoping for even a small reaction to defend his mother, but all she saw was quiet agreement. In that moment, she knew the roots of the conflict had sunk deeper than she'd imagined. She still remembered what Charles told her before he passed. "Never underestimate greed, Livy. It can turn family into strangers." Back then, she thought he was too pessimistic. But now, seeing the way Audrey looked at her house with the eyes of an appraiser rather than a daughter-in-law, Olivia understood how right Charles had been. That night, after they left, she walked through each room, touching the family photos on the walls, the old piano where Marcus played his first song. "This house will never belong to someone who only sees dollar signs," she whispered. A resolve rose in her, even though she didn't yet know how she would act on it. But she knew the conflict between her and Audrey wasn't just words, it was a drawn-out covert battle, and Marcus, her only child, was taking the other side. One summer evening, Olivia got a call from Marcus. "Mom, we want to stop by this weekend. There's something important to discuss." His voice sounded unfamiliar, no longer warm like before. A small wave of dread passed through her. Her intuition told her this wouldn't be a normal visit. That day, she baked a peach cobbler and brewed sweet tea, trying to maintain a family atmosphere. But instead of just Marcus and Audrey, they arrived with her parents. Olivia was surprised, but smiled and invited them in. She hadn't even finished setting the table when Audrey started. "We want to talk seriously about your future and ours." The way she said "we" instead of "I" chilled Olivia. This wasn't a family visit. It felt like a strategy meeting, and she was the problem to be handled. Audrey's mother, Louise, glanced around the living room with its antique furniture and vintage photographs. "Miss Olivia, at your age, living alone in such a big house is too much. You should consider a safer option." Audrey's father, Richard, joined in. "We know the manager of an excellent assisted living facility, Medical Care Meals Community Activities, much more suitable for you." Olivia sat in silence, listening to them go on and on, her eyes fixed on Marcus. Her son sat beside his fiancée, nodding along with every word like an obedient puppet. Audrey folded her hands, her voice sweet but razor-sharp. "We're getting married soon and we want kids. Your house is really too big and empty for one person. If you move into assisted living, it's safer for you and helps us have a place to start our family." Her words sounded reasonable, but each one hit Olivia's ears like a stone. This house was where Charles and she built a life. It held their entire history, and here they were discussing it like an item to be transferred. Olivia set her teacup down calmly. "I can still take care of myself, and I have no plans to leave this house." The room tensed like a stretched wire. Louise raised an eyebrow, her tone half pity, half threat. "You need to be realistic. One fall in the bathroom can be dangerous. If you refuse to change, it'll be trouble for everyone." Richard pulled a packet of papers from his pocket and placed it in front of Olivia. "These are average costs for assisted living. With the money from selling your house, you could cover it for decades and still have some left to help Marcus and Audrey start their life." Olivia looked at the packet, her heart pounding. There was no doubt this was a planned ambush. They came armed with arguments, evidence, even calculations. Marcus finally spoke, his voice shaky, as if he'd memorized the lines. "Mom, I know this is hard, but think of us. Audrey and I have sacrificed so much for this wedding. All we need is a little help from you." Olivia looked at her son and saw a stranger. Gone was the child who clung to her when scared of thunderstorms. Gone was the young man who promised to protect his mother after his father died. Before her was a man putting his fiancé and in-laws above his own mother. She gave a small, dry laugh and lowered her voice. "Help or take—" The table fell silent. Audrey bit her lip, then snapped. "Miss Olivia, don't be negative. This is best for everyone. If you insist on being difficult, we'll have to find another way." Her eyes flashed coldly. Olivia understood exactly what "another way" meant. That wasn't a suggestion, it was a threat. She barely slept that night. She walked through the house room by room, touching her wedding photo with Charles, the old piano, the scratches on the floor from when Marcus used to drag his toy trucks as a child. Everything seemed to whisper, "Don't let anyone take us." The next morning, she took out a small voice recorder. From that day on, whenever Audrey and Marcus came over, she slipped it in her pocket or set it on a shelf. She recorded every word, every threat, every time they discussed moving Mom out. She knew that if she was going to fight them, she needed proof. Another evening, Audrey strode straight into the kitchen and tossed a few assisted living brochures on the table. "Take a look, Mom. You'll have friends' activities. It's much more fun than being alone here." Olivia nodded politely, but inside her anger burned. She kept those brochures not to consider them, but to add to the evidence of their plan to push her out of her own home. Audrey grew bolder by the day. She called non-stop, texted to pressure Olivia. Marcus gradually spoke with the same voice. "Mom, Audrey just cares about you. If you love me, help us get settled." Olivia listened, her heart tightening. Love. What kind of love forces a mother to abandon her memories and her home? That's not love. It's exploitation dressed up as filial piety. She understood they had moved past snide comments. Now they had a plan backed by Audrey's family. And if she didn't prepare one day, they might really force her out with legal tricks. That night, with cicadas chirping outside her window, she made herself a promise. If they won a war, she would fight. She wouldn't let her home become their trophy. She once thought she could endure the snide remarks, ignore the side glances, and everything would pass. But after that calculated family meeting, she knew there was no turning back. Audrey and her family had no intention of appealing to love. They had a plan and were ready to force her out. If she wavered, it would all be over. Olivia went to her bedroom and opened the wooden wardrobe Charles had built by hand more than 30 years ago. In the deepest corner behind her winter clothes was a black metal box. She still wore the small key on a chain around her neck. Inside were documents Charles and she had kept for years, known to no one, not even Marcus. Sitting on the bed, she opened each folder. The warm glow of the old bedside lamp illuminated every line and number she'd read hundreds of times, but never without amazement. Before her wasn't the estate of a middle-class retired teacher like people assumed. It was a substantial fortune, the result of Charles's patient, careful investing. Charles wasn't just a high school history teacher like everyone believed. He'd been a founding shareholder in a shipping company that later expanded into real estate. When Marcus was little, Charles and Olivia agreed live modestly, hide the truth about their wealth. He told her, "Flaunted wealth brings trouble, Livy. Quiet wealth truly protects the family." She agreed. For years they kept a simple front. She worked part-time, giving piano lessons, and drove a plain car. This wooden Victorian house, to others just an old family home, was their fortress for keeping secrets. The papers in her hands that night said it all: an office building for rent in downtown Savannah, a luxury condo for short-term rental stocks in both their names, and long-term investments worth several $1,000,000. There was also a vacation home in Charleston where Charles and she had dreamed of retiring. She slowly turned to the last folder, the agreement with Raymond, who had managed their investments since Charles died. Raymond knew everything, but respected her wish to keep it private. She had told him, "Only reveal this if it ever truly becomes necessary." That night, alone in her familiar room, she felt pain mixed with strength. She hurt because Marcus didn't know what she'd done for him. While she guarded their estate and quietly covered his small debts during his early working years, he stood by as his fiancé, and her family tried to push his mother out of her home. But she also realized she wasn't powerless. She had tools to fight back, and this time she wouldn't miss her chance. The next day, she called her old friend Vanetta Thompson. They had been college roommates at Spelman decades ago, and though their paths diverged, Olivia into teaching Vanetta into finance, they had remained close. Vanetta was now a retired financial consultant who had worked with some of the biggest firms in Atlanta. They met at a small soul food cafe in the historic district where Vanetta liked to have her morning coffee. When Olivia walked in, Vanetta stood to greet her concern evident in her eyes. Olivia told her everything, the family meeting, the threats, the plan to send her to assisted living. Vanetta listened, her expression darkening. "I'll check into their finances. I still have contacts who can access credit reports and financial records. But Livy, are you sure? The truth can be brutal." "I need to know, Vanetta. I have to understand what they're plotting." 3 days later, Vanetta called, urgency in her voice. "Olivia, we need to meet in person. I found things you wouldn't believe." Olivia drove her old Ford to Vanetta's condo. Her friend had a thick red folder ready on the table. She slid it to Olivia, her tone dropping low. "Brace yourself." Olivia opened the file. Each page felt like a knife to her chest. Marcus and Audrey were drowning in debt. First the credit cards, 5 different cards with a total balance over $95,000. Her hands shook as she read line after line: luxury fashion stores, high-end restaurants, a trip to the Bahamas, extravagant gifts. Nothing essential, just indulgence. Next were the car loans, 2 new luxury cars with monthly payments, nearly $1,500 each. Marcus's salary as a marketing manager, $62,000 a year, clearly couldn't cover it. Their downtown Savannah apartment was also 3 months past due on rent. Eviction loomed. She turned to the last section, which Vanetta had marked in red. Total debt, more than $180,000, not counting the wedding loan. Olivia let go the folder, slipping onto the table as her vision blurred. Her heart clenched, not at the numbers, but at her son, the boy she raised with sweat and tears, letting his life sink this far. Vanetta gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Olivia, they're playing a desperate game, and the trump card is your house. If they get it, they'll sell it immediately to pay off the debt. There's no future or family happiness here, just desperation and greed." Olivia sat in silence, her head spinning. Her heart was torn between pity for her son and a deep, aching anger. Marcus should have honored the value of hard work that Charles had instilled in him, but instead of learning, he let Audrey drag him into a pit of debt. That night, she went home and sat in the dark living room, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock Charles had restored. She spread the papers across the table and stared at the cold numbers. They read like a verdict. She saw Marcus as a little boy running in the yard, laughing with bright, hopeful eyes. Now in these pages, he existed only as a desperate debtor. She picked up a pen and wrote a few lines in the journal Charles had left her. "Our son has lost his way. He thinks he can take it his mother's house to save his life. But he doesn't know that inside this house, I've kept the faith and the strength to fight back." The next day, she met with Raymond Lewis at his small law office on Broughton Street. The office was modest, but dignified, with dark wood paneling and shelves lined with law books. On the walls hung framed photos of Raymond with civil rights leaders from decades past. She set the financial file on his desk and told him what Vanetta had found. He nodded, thoughtful. "I suspected as much. Now we have evidence. If they dare sue, we'll use these debts to show the real motive: greed and exploitation." Raymond advised her not to act rashly. He would prepare the legal filings, and she would keep pretending she knew nothing, letting Audrey and Marcus expose more of their plan. She agreed. Walking out of his office into the warm Savannah air, she felt both heavy and relieved. Heavy, because her son had fallen so far; relieved, because she was finally no longer in the dark. In the days that followed, she watched closely. Every time they visited, she noticed the details: Audrey's brand-new designer shoes, the gleam of Marcus's expensive watch. She no longer saw mere showing off. She saw the signs of desperation dressed up in luxury. One evening, when Marcus stepped outside to take a call, Olivia overheard Audrey whispering in the kitchen to her mother, "Once we get the house, we'll pay everything off and buy a new condo. She's weak. She'll give in soon." Olivia turned away, her heart like ice. But this time, instead of trembling, she felt a sharp clarity flood her veins. She knew she was no longer just a victim. She was becoming the main player in the game they thought she'd abandoned. That night, she opened the black box again, took out paper and pen, and wrote a simple plan: recordings gather evidence, prepare to go public. She wrote it clearly, each word like a nail. She also began calling a few old colleagues who had worked with Charles. They knew how he invested, and they were willing to testify if needed. She gathered each piece, building the larger picture. Before, she only saw Audrey as cruel and Marcus as weak, but now she saw more clearly. Both were trapped in their own debt snare, and instead of choosing decency to climb out, they chose to sacrifice the mother. She closed the file and exhaled deeply. Night draped over the house, but inside her, a light had begun to glow. She held the truth in her hands, and when the time came, that truth would cut through every illusion they'd built. One Sunday morning, Olivia sat in her usual pew at the First African Baptist Church, the oldest black church in America. The choir sang "Amazing Grace" as sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows. Pastor Johnson's sermon was about the prodigal son, and tears filled Olivia's eyes as he spoke about children who lose their way. After the service, as she was walking to her car, Pastor Johnson approached her. "Sister Olivia, I sense something's troubling you. Is everything all right?" She hesitated, then spoke softly. "My son has chosen a path that breaks my heart, Pastor. He and his fiancée want to take my home." Pastor Johnson nodded slowly. "Sometimes those we love the most hurt us the deepest. But remember Ecclesiastes, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. There is a time for silence, Sister Olivia, but there is also a time to speak." His words settled in her heart like a seed. Yes, the time for silence was ending. The time to speak was approaching. That afternoon, the wind off the Savannah River blew harder than usual. The sky hung heavy with gray clouds, and waves pounded against the riverfront like drums warning of trouble. Olivia sat in the living room with a cup of chamomile tea, gone cold eyes on the window. Deep down, she sensed a real storm, not offshore, but in this family was about to hit. Right on cue, there was a knock. Audrey came in, not bothering to hide her usual arrogance, a tight red dress, high heels clicking on the polished hardwood floor. Marcus followed tense, still letting his fiancée lead. Audrey didn't sit. She stood in the center of the room, as if to claim it all. "Olivia, I'm not here to beat around the bush. Our wedding is in 1 week. Marcus and I have decided this house is the best wedding gift you can give us." Olivia set her cup down and looked calmly into Audrey's ambitious, bright eyes. "A wedding gift, Audrey. Do you understand what this house means to me? It's not a trinket for a party." She laughed, a shrill sound slicing through the room. "Meaning, for a woman pushing 70, does meaning matter more than reality? You can't manage a house this big. Better let us use it. It's not like you need much anymore." Marcus shifted as if wanting to speak, then stayed silent when Audrey gripped his hand. Olivia saw a flicker of concern in her son's eyes, weak as a candle about to be extinguished. She stayed still, not angry like before. Her calm made Audrey bristle. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a threat. "If you keep clinging to this house, don't blame us for finding another way. You know at your age a few doctor's notes are enough for a judge to say you can't make decisions. Then you'll lose everything." Each word pierced like a cold needle. But instead of trembling, Olivia smiled not with joy, but with bitter resolve. "You've got your script ready, don't you, Audrey? But you forgot one thing. I'm not that easy to handle." She stood and looked straight at Marcus. "Son, do you really agree with what your fiancé just said? Do you see your mother as a burden, someone to use and discard?" Marcus kept his head down and said nothing. That silence hurt more than any accusation. Olivia sighed and turned away, not wanting them to see her eyes welling up. Audrey took Marcus's silence as victory. She sneered. "Good. Then we're in agreement. After the wedding, you'll sign the transfer papers and we'll handle everything. In return, you can live somewhere smaller and quieter. Everybody wins." She spun on her heel, her stiletto clicks cracking through the empty room. Marcus followed, but before stepping out, he glanced back at his mother, his eyes lost as if begging for help. Yet no words came. The door closed, leaving a heavy silence behind. Olivia dropped into a chair, her hands trembling not from fear, but from a surge of pain. She had waited for Marcus to take her side just once, and once again her son chose silence. Night fell and the sky grew darker. Distant thunder rolled in, warning that a real storm was coming in from the Atlantic. Olivia walked slowly to her bedroom and opened the old safe in the closet, the one she hadn't touched since Charles died. Her hand brushed the cold metal, her heart equal parts anxious and resolved. The key turned once, and the safe door clicked open with a heavy sound. Inside, along with a few yellowed photo albums, was a brown leather folder Charles had told her about before he passed. "If you ever feel cornered, open it. Everything you need to protect yourself is in here." She pulled the folder out and set it on her vanity. The leather was worn but still sturdy. She opened it to reveal neat pages, property deeds, stock certificates, savings accounts, investment contracts. The total value far exceeded anything Marcus and Audrey could imagine. She read each page carefully and felt how clearly Charles had anticipated the future. He knew this world wasn't short on people willing to use tricks to take what isn't theirs, even family, and he had left her the tools to fight back. There were handwritten letters, too, his familiar slanted script. "Olivia, never think living modestly is weakness. It's your greatest strength. But when you must use the truth to protect yourself, these assets aren't just money. They're the belief that you deserve to live with freedom and respect." By then, tears were sliding down her face. She traced his handwriting as if his warmth were still there. A new strength rose in her, not from anger, but from love and fairness. She organized the documents and tucked them into a small leather bag. Then she wrote a few lines in her notebook. "Tomorrow the storm will come. I'm ready. If they want to turn a wedding day into a day of theft, then that very day will be the day they learn about consequences. They think I'm weak, but they don't know I am Olivia, the woman who never bows." Outside, rain began to patter on the roof tiles. She closed the notebook and sat by the window, watching a black sky split by lightning. The storm was truly coming out there and inside her own family. But this time, she wasn't the one trembling and waiting. She was the one prepared to face it. Olivia Patterson's wedding day attire was not what she had once imagined. Instead of the mother of the groom finery she had dreamed of wearing when Marcus was a child, she chose a simple navy blue dress with a modest pearl necklace, the one Charles had given her on their 30th anniversary. As she fastened the clasp, she caught her reflection in the vanity mirror. The face looking back at her was lined with years, but the eyes held a fire that surprised even her. The day was strangely beautiful, with sunlight filtering through the Spanish moss that draped the oak trees outside her window. Savannah in June was always humid, but today the air felt electric, charged with the promise of confrontation. "Today is the day," she whispered to Charles's photograph on her nightstand. "You always said there would come a time when silence would no longer serve me. I believe that time has arrived." She took the small leather bag containing the documents and placed it carefully in her purse. As she closed the front door of her Victorian home, she paused to look back at the entryway with its polished hardwood and the staircase Charles had restored by hand. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was she doing the right thing? Would this destroy any chance of reconciliation with Marcus? But then she remembered Audrey's cold threat. "A few doctor's notes are enough for a judge to say you can't make decisions." Her resolve hardened. She locked the door and walked to her old Ford. Whatever happened today, she would face it with her dignity intact. The Riverview Hotel ballroom was transformed into a showcase of wealth and pretension. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, reflecting in the polished silver and crystal glasses that adorned tables draped in white linen. Floral arrangements of white roses and orchids towered from centerpieces that must have cost more than a month of Olivia's pension. The irony wasn't lost on her. This lavish display, which she now knew was funded by credit cards already maxed out, was the perfect stage for the battle ahead. Olivia was seated at a table far from the main wedding party, surrounded by distant acquaintances and Marcus's colleagues who barely knew her. She noticed the glances, the whispers behind hands. Audrey had been busy spreading her narrative, poor Marcus with his aging mother, who might need special care soon. The ceremony itself was mercifully brief, though watching Marcus pledge his life to a woman who planned to rob his mother of her home and dignity cut deep into Olivia's heart. When they kissed, sealing their vows, she closed her eyes briefly, remembering the sweet little boy who once promised he would always protect her. During the reception, Olivia sat quietly watching. Audrey moved through the crowd like a queen at court, accepting congratulations and showing off her diamond ring. Marcus followed in her wake, smiling, but with a tension around his eyes that only a mother would notice. Richard, Audrey's father, took the microphone for a toast. His voice boomed across the ballroom. "To my beautiful daughter and her lucky husband May, your life together be filled with all the best things money can buy." Laughter rippled through the crowd, but Olivia saw the sharp glance Audrey shot her father. Too close to the truth, perhaps. As coffee and dessert were served, Olivia spotted Raymond Lewis entering the ballroom. The distinguished attorney nodded discreetly to her from near the entrance. Beside him stood Vanetta Thompson, elegant in a burgundy dress, her silver hair styled impeccably. Gladys Williams, Olivia's neighbor of 15 years, completed the trio, her eyes scanning the room until they locked with Olivia's. Her allies had arrived. Olivia felt a calm settle over her. She had spent so many months alone in this battle, enduring the cuts and jabs in isolation. Now seeing these three people who believed in her, who knew her worth beyond what Audrey had tried to reduce her to, gave her strength. The moment approached. Richard was calling for attention again, glass raised high. "And now, before the dancing begins, I'd like to say a few words about family, about how important it is to take care of our elders to ensure they're properly looked after." His eyes slid meaningfully toward Olivia. "Marcus and Audrey have some wonderful plans that will benefit everyone in this new family they're creating." This was it. The public announcement of their intentions thinly veiled as concern. Olivia stood slowly, her chair scraping softly on the polished floor. A few heads turned. She walked deliberately toward the small stage where Richard stood, her heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood. "I believe I should respond to that," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly hushed room. She extended her hand for the microphone, and Richard, caught off guard by her directness, handed it over. Olivia surveyed the room, taking in the 200 faces staring back at her. She spotted Marcus, his expression a mix of confusion and alarm. Audrey stood beside him, eyes narrowing suspiciously. "For those who don't know me, I'm Olivia Patterson, Marcus's mother." Her voice was steady, warm even. "When my son was 8 years old, he asked me what love meant. I told him love is protection, sacrifice, and truth." She paused, letting the words settle. "I've spent 40 years as a teacher showing children how to find their voices. Today, I need to find mine." From the corner of her eye, she saw Audrey moving quickly toward her, Marcus trailing behind. "For months, I've been told I'm too old to manage my affairs, too frail to live in my own home. I've been presented with brochures for assisted living facilities and told I should be grateful for the concern." Audrey reached the stage, her wedding dress rustling. "Mom, this isn't the time," she hissed, trying to take the microphone. Olivia held firm. "I believe this is exactly the time before papers are signed and decisions made that can't be undone." She turned back to the audience. "What my new daughter-in-law and her family don't know is that I am neither helpless nor without resources." Audrey's face contorted. "Stop this right now. The home they're so eager to sell was paid for decades ago by my late husband Charles, who was not just a history teacher, but a founding investor in Patterson Maritime Shipping." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Marcus stood frozen, his face draining of color. Olivia continued, her voice growing stronger. "The modest pension they assume is my only income is supplemented by revenue from commercial properties, investments, and stock holdings managed for the past 20 years by attorney Raymond Lewis, who is here today." Raymond nodded from his position near the door, his presence confirming her words. "I have documentation of every conversation where my new daughter-in-law discussed having me declared incompetent, every instance where plans were made to sell my home from under me." Olivia opened her purse and held up a small recording device. The room erupted in whispers. She could hear phrases like elder abuse and shameful rippling through the crowd. But perhaps most painful is this. She pulled out the red folder Vanetta had prepared. Financial records showing that while plotting to take my home, my son and his wife have accumulated over $180,000 in debt, credit cards, car loans, and unpaid rent. Marcus finally moved, stepping forward, his voice breaking. "Mom, why are you saying this? Why now?" It was the question she had been waiting for. She looked directly into her son's eyes. "Because I hoped you would see me with love, not calculation. Because I hoped my son would remember the values his father taught him. Because I believed you would protect me, not conspire against me." The words hung in the air between them. Marcus seemed to physically recoil, as if her words had struck him with physical force. That was when Audrey snapped. Her face contorted with rage, she grabbed a glass of red wine from a nearby table and flung it directly into Olivia's face. The crimson liquid splashed across Olivia's cheeks, soaking into her dress and dripping onto the floor. The room collectively gasped. "Your pension should only cover a nursing home, not keeping that house," Audrey spat, voice rising to a shriek. Olivia stood perfectly still, the wine running down her face and neck, staining her pearl necklace. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry out. With deliberate calm, she took the handkerchief Raymond had pressed into her hand and slowly wiped her face. "Thank you, Audrey," she said quietly, "for showing everyone exactly who you are." The ballroom fell into stunned silence. Audrey stood trembling with fury, her white wedding gown a stark contrast to her flushed face. Marcus remained frozen, unable to look at his mother or the guests, witnessing his shame. Olivia handed the microphone to the DJ and turned to leave the stage. As she walked down the steps, Gladys Williams stepped forward from the crowd, putting a supportive arm around her shoulders. Together they walked toward the exit, the crowd parting before them. Behind her, chaos erupted. She could hear Audrey's shrill voice trying to regain control, Marcus's quieter tones, pleading for calm, and the rising murmur of guests processing what they had witnessed. None of it mattered now. Olivia had spoken her truth. The mask had been torn away. In the hotel lobby, Raymond and Vanetta were waiting. Raymond's face was grim, but satisfied. "You did well, Olivia. Better than we rehearsed." Vanetta embraced her, unmindful of the wine stains. "I'm so proud of you, Livy. That took tremendous courage." Olivia felt oddly calm despite the confrontation. "What happens now?" Raymond adjusted his glasses. "Now we wait. They'll react probably legally, and we'll be ready." Gladys squeezed her hand. "You won't be alone this time, Olivia. We're all with you." Olivia nodded, grateful beyond words for these friends who had stood by her. As they walked toward the parking lot, she heard rapid footsteps behind them. "Mrs. Patterson, wait." It was the hotel manager, a slender man in an immaculate suit hurrying after them. "I need to inform you that since you were listed as the financial guarantor for this wedding, and you've just withdrawn your support, we will need to halt service immediately." Olivia hadn't expected this. "I paid the deposit months ago." The manager looked uncomfortable. "Yes, ma'am, but the final payment was due today, and Mr. Harris Audrey's father just informed our accounting department that you would be covering it." Another manipulation. "Of course." Raymond stepped forward. "My client is not responsible for any further payments. The contract clearly states that the final payment was the responsibility of the bride's family." And the manager nodded. "We understand that now. Service is being suspended as we speak." As they continued to the parking lot, Olivia could hear the commotion building behind them as news spread that the open bar and dinner service were being cut short. One small victory, she thought, but the war was just beginning. True to Raymond's prediction, the legal notice arrived 3 days later. Olivia was in her garden tending to her roses when she heard the doorbell. A courier handed her a thick envelope stamped by the Chatham County Court. Her hands trembled slightly as she signed for it. Inside, sitting on her porch swing, she read the contents with a growing sense of both anger and vindication. The words leapt off the page: "Petition to evaluate the civil capacity of Olivia Patterson, aged 68. Marcus and Audrey were making good on their threat, claiming she was mentally incompetent to manage her own affairs. The paperwork included statements from wedding guests who claimed she acted erratically and showed signs of financial delusion. There were even signatures from 2 neighbors she barely knew, stating she had been muttering to herself, and seemed forgetful. Olivia called Raymond immediately. "They've filed just as you predicted." Raymond's voice was calm. "Bring the paperwork to my office this afternoon. We'll review it together. And Olivia, don't worry. We anticipated this move." Later that day, seated in Raymond's wood-paneled office, Olivia listened as he outlined their counter-strategy. "First, we've arranged for you to be evaluated by Dr. Angela Foster. She's the most respected geriatric psychiatrist in Georgia, and her assessment will carry significant weight with the court." Olivia nodded. Tomorrow morning, her office is in the Medical Arts Building downtown." Raymond leaned forward, his expression serious. "Olivia, I want you to understand something. This type of case, attempting to have a parent declared incompetent to gain control of their assets, isn't uncommon. But what is uncommon is having a client with your level of preparation and evidence." He gestured to the recordings, the financial documents, the photographs of Audrey bringing a real estate agent to measure Olivia's house. Most elderly victims don't have friends like Vanetta with financial expertise, or neighbors like Gladys who noticed and documented suspicious activity. You're not the easy target they thought you were. Olivia felt a surge of gratitude for these allies who had rallied around her. "What do you think our chances are?" Raymond smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "With Dr. Foster's evaluation and our evidence better than good. But Olivia, you should prepare yourself. This will get uglier before it gets better. They've staked everything on getting your house." She squared her shoulders. "I've lived through uglier things than this, Raymond. I taught high school for 40 years. His laugh was warm and genuine. "Then heaven help Marcus and Audrey." The next morning, Olivia met Dr. Angela Foster, a dignified woman in her 60s, with keen, intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses. Her office was warm and inviting, with African art on the walls and comfortable furniture. For 2 hours, Dr. Foster conducted a thorough evaluation, cognitive tests, memory assessments, questions about financial decision-making, and discussions about Olivia's daily routines and future plans. At the end, Dr. Foster set down her notepad and smiled. "Mrs. Patterson, you have nothing to worry about. Your cognitive function is above average for your age group, and your decision-making capacity is entirely intact." Olivia felt relief wash over her. "Thank you, Doctor." Dr. Foster's expression grew more serious. "What concerns me is the emotional impact of this situation. How are you coping with your son's betrayal?" The direct question caught Olivia off guard. She'd been so focused on the practical aspects of defending herself that she hadn't fully processed the emotional wound. She faltered. "I keep busy. I try not to dwell on it." Dr. Foster nodded understandingly. "That's common, but not always healthy long-term. I'd like to offer you some sessions to work through these feelings. Not because you need them for the court case, my evaluation today is more than sufficient, but because everyone needs support when facing family trauma." Olivia hadn't considered therapy. In her generation, particularly in the Black community, such matters were often kept private, handled within the family or through the church. "I'll think about it," she promised. "Good." Dr. Foster wrote something on a card. "I also run a support group for elders facing financial exploitation. Many of them are women in situations similar to yours. You might find it helpful to connect with others who understand." Olivia took the card, touched by the offer. "I might just do that." As Olivia left Dr. Foster's office, her phone rang. It was Gladys, her voice urgent. "Olivia, you need to come home right away. Marcus is at your house." Her heart jumped. "Is he alone?" "Yes. Audrey's not with him. He looks terrible, Olivia, like he hasn't slept in days." Olivia's emotions warred within her concern for her son, battling with self-protection. "I'll be right there. Don't let him in until I arrive." When she pulled into her driveway 20 minutes later, she saw Marcus sitting on the front steps, head in his hands. He looked up as she approached, and the sight shocked her. His face was haggard eyes, red-rimmed and underscored by dark circles. His wedding suit was rumpled as if he'd slept in it. "Marcus." She kept her distance, wary of manipulation. He stood swaying slightly. "Mom, I didn't know where else to go." "What happened?" He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Everything's falling apart. Audrey's furious. Her parents are threatening to disown her. The hotel is suing us for the unpaid balance, and now this court filing. His voice broke. I didn't know it would go this far. Olivia felt her heart soften despite her resolve. This was still her son, the child she had raised. But she remembered Raymond's warning. This could be another manipulation. Why are you here, Marcus? He looked up, his eyes pleading. I need help, Mom. I'm drowning in debt, my marriage is 3 days old and already collapsing, and I've betrayed the one person who's always been there for me. She studied him, trying to see beyond her maternal instinct to comfort him. Are you here because you need money, or because you're truly sorry? His face crumpled. Both, he admitted. And I hate myself for it. I've become someone I don't recognize. At least he was honest. Olivia sighed. Come inside. We need to talk. In the kitchen, she made coffee, while Marcus sat at the table where he had eaten countless meals growing up. The familiar domestic routine felt surreal given the circumstances. She set a mug before him and took a seat opposite. Tell me everything, Marcus. How did you get into this mess? He wrapped his hands around the mug as if seeking warmth. It started small. Audrey loves nice things, designer clothes, expensive restaurants. I wanted to impress her, so I started using credit cards. Then we needed a bigger apartment, newer cars. And you never thought to live within your means. He winced. I tried bringing it up once. Audrey said I wasn't ambitious enough, that her ex-boyfriend never made her feel limited. He stared into his coffee. I was afraid of losing her. So you decided to lose your mother instead. The blunt question made him flinch. I never thought of it that way. Audrey made it sound reasonable, you living in this big house alone, the maintenance becoming too much as you age. She said everyone does this eventually. And the plan to have me declared incompetent. He looked truly ashamed. That was after you refused to consider selling. Audrey's father suggested it. He said it happens all the time, that most judges side with the children in these cases. Olivia's anger flared. Did you ever once think about what it would mean for me to be stripped of my autonomy, forced from my home, labeled as incompetent? Tears spilled down Marcus's cheeks. I didn't let myself think about it. I compartmentalized, told myself it was for the best. He looked up, anguish clear in his expression. But at the wedding, when you spoke about Dad's values, about protection and truth, it all came crashing down. I saw myself through your eyes, and I hated what I'd become. Olivia wanted to believe him. The mother in her yearned to embrace her child, to comfort him, and say all was forgiven. But the woman who had been betrayed, who had nearly lost everything, needed more than tears. What about the court petition? It was filed after the wedding. Marcus shook his head miserably. Audrey and her father filed it. They have a power of attorney I signed before the wedding. I was trying to back out, telling them we should drop the whole thing, but they said it was too late. And now, what do you want from me, Marcus? He took a deep breath. First, your forgiveness, though I don't deserve it. Second, your help to get out of this financial hole without losing everything. And third, he hesitated, advice on whether my marriage can or should be saved. Olivia regarded her son thoughtfully. His request was both vulnerable and self-serving, much like Marcus himself. She needed to be wise here to find the balance between maternal love and self-protection. I can't give you any of those things today, Marcus. Forgiveness takes time. Financial help requires a plan and commitment from you. And as for your marriage, she sighed, that's something only you can decide after serious reflection on what kind of life you want to build. He nodded, accepting her response. What can I do to start making this right? Olivia considered the question carefully. First, you need to legally withdraw from the court petition against me. Then you need to meet with a financial counselor, not me, not family, but a professional who can help you develop a realistic plan to address your debt. And then we start rebuilding trust one day at a time. It won't be quick, and it won't be easy. Marcus looked down at his hands. I don't know if I'm strong enough to stand up to Audrey and her family. They're intimidating when crossed. Olivia reached across the table and took her son's hand. It was the first physical contact they'd had since before the wedding. You're Charles Patterson's son. You have his strength in you, even if you've forgotten it. The mention of his father made Marcus's eyes well up again. He would be so ashamed of me. Yes, Olivia said honestly, but he would also believe in your capacity to change. She squeezed his hand once, then released it. Now, I think you should go. Get some rest, talk to a lawyer about withdrawing from the petition, and call me tomorrow. Marcus stood looking both relieved and bereft. At the door, he turned back. I am sorry, Mom. Truly. I know, she said softly. That's the first step. After he left, Olivia called Raymond. She explained Marcus's visit, his apparent remorse, and his claim that Audrey and her father had filed the petition using a power of attorney. Raymond's voice was cautious. This complicates things. If Marcus is genuinely withdrawing his support, but signed a broad power of attorney, Audrey may still have legal standing to pursue the case. What does that mean for us? It means we proceed as planned with Dr. Foster's evaluation and our evidence, but it also means we need to determine exactly what powers Marcus granted to Audrey or her father. Olivia felt a headache building. He looked terrible, Raymond. Broken. That's either genuine remorse or excellent theater. Either way, we maintain our legal position until we see concrete evidence of his withdrawal from their scheme. After hanging up, Olivia sat on her porch swing, watching the sunset cast long shadows across her garden. The old oak tree that had stood sentinel over the house for a century seemed to whisper comfort as its leaves rustled in the evening breeze. She thought of Charles, of the life they'd built here, of the son they had raised with such hope and love. Had they made mistakes? Had their decision to hide their wealth from Marcus ultimately harmed him, leaving him unprepared for someone like Audrey? These questions had no easy answers. But as twilight deepened into night, Olivia felt a curious sense of peace settle over her. Whatever came next, reconciliation with her son, or a continued legal battle, she was no longer facing it alone or in the dark. She had spoken her truth. She had allies who believed in her, and most importantly, she had reclaimed her own power. The next day brought unexpected developments. Olivia was working in her garden when Gladys hurried across the street waving a tablet. You need to see this, Olivia. Your story has gone viral. Olivia wiped her hands on her gardening apron. What do you mean? Gladys handed her the tablet open to a local news site. The headline made her gasp. Mother of groom exposes wedding day scheme to seize her home. Beneath it was a blurry photo clearly taken at the reception, showing Audrey in her white gown confronting Olivia. The article detailed what had happened, quoting anonymous guests who witnessed the scene. Oh my goodness, Olivia murmured. How did this happen? Gladys looked slightly guilty. Well, I might have mentioned what happened to my niece who works at the paper. But Olivia, this is good. Public exposure makes it harder for them to pursue their case against you. Olivia wasn't so sure. Media attention was the last thing she wanted. She had hoped to resolve this privately with dignity. Her phone began ringing, first Raymond, then Vanetta, then numbers she didn't recognize. When she answered Raymond's call, his voice was urgent. Have you seen the news? Just now. Raymond, I didn't want this. I know, but we can use it. The court of public opinion can influence the actual court, especially in cases like this. Judge Michaels, who's been assigned to your case, is particularly sensitive to community perception. By afternoon, the story had spread beyond local news to several national outlets focusing on elder rights. Olivia's phone rang constantly with interview requests, which she declined. Then came the text from Marcus. Mom, have you seen the news? Audrey's parents are livid. They're threatening to sue for defamation. Olivia replied simply, Truth is a defense against defamation. Later that evening, as Olivia was preparing for bed, her doorbell rang. Cautious after everything that had happened, she checked through the peephole before opening the door. It was Dr. Angela Foster, looking concerned. I'm sorry to come by unannounced, Mrs. Patterson, but I saw the news and wanted to check on you personally. Touched by the gesture, Olivia invited her in. In the living room, Dr. Foster explained, Media attention can be overwhelming, especially when it involves family conflict. How are you holding up? Olivia sighed, sinking into her favorite armchair. I never wanted any of this to become public. I just wanted to protect my home and my dignity. Dr. Foster nodded understandingly. Unfortunately, once these situations escalate to legal action, privacy becomes difficult to maintain, but I have some news that might help. She opened her briefcase and removed a document. I've completed my evaluation report. It states unequivocally that you are fully competent with excellent cognitive function and decision-making capacity. I've already filed it with the court and sent copies to both attorneys. Olivia took the report, scanning the professional language that certified her competence. It felt strange to need such validation, but also deeply reassuring. Thank you, Doctor. This means more than you know. Dr. Foster smiled warmly. It's my pleasure to speak the truth. Too often in my practice, I see elderly individuals, particularly women of color, whose voices are dismissed or ignored. She leaned forward. Mrs. Patterson, I'd like to invite you to speak at an upcoming symposium on elder rights. Your story is powerful and could help others recognize and resist similar situations. Olivia hesitated. I'm not a public speaker. You were a teacher for 40 years, Dr. Foster reminded her gently. And from what I witnessed at our evaluation, you're articulate, insightful, and have an important perspective to share. The idea was daunting, but also appealing. Could her painful experience serve a larger purpose? I'll consider it, she promised. After Dr. Foster left, Olivia sat for a long time in the quiet house, thinking about the unexpected turns her life had taken. 6 weeks ago, she had been a retired teacher living a peaceful life. Now she was at the center of a legal battle, a media story, and potentially a spokesperson for elder rights. The changes were overwhelming, but not entirely unwelcome. There was something empowering about stepping out of the shadows, about refusing to be silenced or sidelined because of her age. As she finally climbed the stairs to bed, Olivia felt an unfamiliar emotion stirring within her. Not just determination or resilience, but something that felt remarkably like purpose. The battle for her home and dignity had awakened something new in her, a voice not just for herself, but potentially for others who had been silenced. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, court dates, decisions about Marcus, and the continuing fallout from the public exposure of the case. But for tonight, Olivia Patterson would sleep soundly in the house that was hers, secure in the knowledge that she was neither helpless nor alone. The storm was still raging, but she was no longer afraid of its fury. The morning of the court hearing dawned with a clarity that seemed almost symbolic. Overnight, a summer storm had swept through Savannah, washing the air clean and leaving behind a brilliant blue sky. Olivia stood on her porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunlight filter through the oak trees. Today would determine much of her future. She dressed with care, a tailored navy suit she'd purchased years ago for parent-teacher conferences, her pearl necklace newly restrung after Audrey's wine assault, and sensible low heels. She wanted to project exactly what she was, a dignified, capable woman who deserved respect. Raymond arrived promptly at 8:30, his silver Cadillac gleaming in the morning light. He stepped out, briefcase in hand, wearing a crisp charcoal suit. At 73, he carried himself with the assurance of a man who had spent decades in courtrooms fighting for justice. "Ready for this, Olivia?" he asked as she locked her front door. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, squaring her shoulders. The ride to the Chatham County Courthouse was quiet, each lost in thought. When they arrived, Olivia was surprised to see a small crowd gathered outside some holding signs reading "Justice for Elders" and "Stop Financial Abuse." She recognized a few faces from church, but many were strangers. "What's happening?" she asked Raymond. He smiled. "Word spreads. Your story touched a nerve, Olivia. These are people standing with you." Vanetta Thompson waited at the top of the courthouse steps, elegant in a burgundy pantsuit. Beside her stood Gladys Williams and several other neighbors. Dr. Angela Foster was there too, clipboard in hand, looking professional and determined. "Your support team has arrived in force," Raymond said. As Olivia climbed the steps, several people reached out to touch her arm or shoulder, murmuring encouragement. An elderly woman she'd never met pressed her hand and whispered, "You speak for all of us today." The weight of what was happening finally settled on Olivia. This was no longer just about her house or her relationship with Marcus. Somehow, her personal struggle had become symbolic of a larger issue: the dignity and autonomy of aging Americans, particularly women of color. Inside the courthouse, the mood shifted to hushed formality. Olivia spotted Marcus sitting alone on a bench, his expression tense. No sign of Audrey or her parents yet. When Marcus saw her, he stood awkwardly, uncertainty in his eyes. Olivia paused. Part of her wanted to embrace her son, to offer comfort despite everything. But the wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too profound. She acknowledged him with a slight nod before following Raymond toward the courtroom. As they waited in the hallway, Olivia's phone vibrated with a text message. It was from Pastor Johnson. "The entire congregation is praying for justice today." Proverbs 31:25. "She is clothed with strength and dignity and laughs without fear of the future." The verse brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Charles had loved that passage, had often quoted it when speaking of her. She felt his presence strongly in this moment, as if he were standing beside her, lending her his strength. The courtroom doors opened, and they filed inside. Judge Michaels, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, presided from the bench. Her reputation for fairness preceded her, though she was known to have little patience for those who wasted the court's time. Olivia took her seat beside Raymond at the respondents' table. Across the aisle, Audrey finally appeared with her parents and a sleek attorney in an expensive suit. Marcus entered separately, sitting behind them, but not with them, a detail that didn't escape Olivia's notice. "All rise," called the bailiff, and the proceedings began. Audrey's attorney, Mr. Prescott, spoke first, his voice smooth as butter. "Your Honor, we've filed this petition out of deep concern for Mrs. Patterson's mental health and decision-making capacity. Her recent behavior, disrupting her son's wedding, making unfounded financial claims, showing increasingly erratic judgment, suggests she is no longer competent to manage her substantial assets." He presented affidavits from several wedding guests claiming Olivia had created a scene and made delusional statements about hidden wealth. 2 neighbors testified that she often forgot to lock her doors and sometimes seemed confused. Olivia listened, amazed at how a carefully constructed narrative could make her sound so helpless, so diminished. Was this how they truly saw her, or was it a convenient fiction to justify their greed? When it was Raymond's turn, he approached the bench with unhurried confidence. "Your Honor, we submit Dr. Angela Foster's comprehensive evaluation conducted just days after the wedding incident." He handed over the report. "Dr. Foster is the foremost geriatric psychiatrist in Georgia, and her assessment is unequivocal. Mrs. Olivia Patterson is fully competent with exceptional cognitive function and decision-making capacity." A murmur rose in the courtroom. Raymond continued methodically dismantling the opposition's case. "We also have evidence demonstrating that this petition is not about Mrs. Patterson's welfare, but rather an attempt to gain control of her assets, particularly her historic home in Savannah's Victorian district." He presented the voice recordings Olivia had made of Audrey and her parents discussing how they would sell the house once they got the old lady out. He showed photographs of Audrey bringing a real estate agent to measure the house without Olivia's knowledge. Judge Michaels' expression grew increasingly troubled as she reviewed the evidence. Then came the financial records documentation, showing that Olivia had transferred over $145,000 to Marcus and Audrey over the past 3 years, covering everything from rent payments to credit card bills to the wedding itself. Far from being incapable, Mrs. Patterson has been the financial bedrock supporting her son and daughter-in-law through their reckless spending, Raymond stated. When she finally refused to continue enabling their behavior, they responded with this petition to have her declared incompetent. Audrey was visibly fuming, whispering furiously to her attorney. Her father sat red-faced while her mother stared straight ahead, lips pressed into a thin line. Judge Michaels adjusted her glasses. "I'd like to hear from Mrs. Patterson directly." She gestured for Olivia to take the stand. Heart pounding, Olivia was sworn in. From this elevated position, she could see everyone in the courtroom: Raymond's encouraging nod, Vanetta's supportive smile, Audrey's cold glare, and Marcus's downcast eyes. "Mrs. Patterson," the judge began, "in your own words, could you explain why you believe this petition has been filed against you?" Olivia took a deep breath. For 40 years, she had taught young people to find their voices. Now she needed to find hers. "Your Honor, I stayed silent for too long." She began, her voice clear and steady. "I thought if I endured things would settle down, but silence turned me into a victim. On my son's wedding night, I was humiliated in front of hundreds, accused of selfishness, threatened with a nursing home. I had no choice but to tell the truth." She detailed how Audrey had gradually isolated Marcus from her, how they had pressured her to move to assisted living, how they had planned to sell her home to cover their mounting debts. "I'm not here fighting my son, Your Honor. I'm here defending the truth and protecting the dignity of a mother who spent her life nurturing her child." The courtroom grew heavy with emotion. Judge Michaels studied Olivia thoughtfully. "And what outcome are you seeking today, Mrs. Patterson?" Olivia considered the question carefully. "I want the freedom to live in my own home, to manage my own affairs, and to be treated with the respect I've earned through a lifetime of hard work. I'm not asking for punishment. I'm asking for protection." Mr. Prescott attempted to cross-examine her, suggesting she was confused about finances, imagining conspiracies, misinterpreting well-intentioned concern as threats. But Olivia remained composed, answering each question with clarity and precision. When Dr. Foster took the stand to explain her evaluation findings, the case against Olivia began to crumble further. With professional authority, she affirmed Olivia's complete competence and raised concerns about the emotional abuse evident in the family dynamics. Just as it seemed the tide had fully turned in Olivia's favor, Mr. Prescott introduced a surprise witness. Mrs. Caroline Jenkins, Olivia's former colleague from the school where she'd taught piano. Olivia tensed. Caroline had been friendly, but never close. What could she possibly testify about? Caroline took the stand, avoiding Olivia's eyes. Under questioning from Mr. Prescott, she recounted several incidents from the past year, Olivia forgetting a lunch date, misplacing her purse at church, becoming emotional during a school reunion. "In your professional opinion," Mr. Prescott asked silkily, "has Mrs. Patterson changed in recent years?" Caroline hesitated. "She seems different, more forgetful, more emotional." Raymond leaned close to Olivia. "They're grasping at straws," he whispered. "Standard aging isn't incompetence." When Raymond cross-examined Caroline, he was respectful but precise. "Mrs. Jenkins, are you aware that Mrs. Patterson lost her husband of 45 years just 18 months ago?" Caroline looked down. "Yes. And would you agree that grief can cause emotional responses and occasional memory lapses without indicating cognitive decline?" "I suppose so." "Have you ever observed Mrs. Patterson unable to manage her finances, make rational decisions about her property, or fail to understand legal documents?" "No," Caroline admitted. "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins." As Caroline stepped down, she finally met Olivia's eyes, mouthing, "I'm sorry." Olivia gave a small nod. Another relationship fractured by Audrey's machinations. Then came the surprise that shifted the entire courtroom atmosphere. Raymond called Marcus to the stand. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Audrey's face paled, then flushed with anger. Marcus stood slowly, straightened his shoulders, and walked to the witness stand with determination that reminded Olivia sharply of Charles. After being sworn in, Marcus spoke with a clarity that surprised even Olivia. "I wish to withdraw my support for this petition," he stated firmly. "It was filed under false pretenses, and I can no longer be part of it." Mr. Prescott jumped up. "Your Honor, this witness is clearly under duress." "I'm not under duress," Marcus interrupted. "I'm finally seeing clearly. This petition was never about my mother's welfare. It was about getting control of her house to solve our financial problems." He turned to look directly at Olivia. "My mother is the most competent person I know. She raised me alone after my father died, managed her career, maintained our home, and somehow found the strength to keep helping me even when I was making terrible decisions." His voice broke. "I betrayed her trust, and I'm ashamed of that. But I won't compound that betrayal by allowing this charade to continue." Audrey stood up, face contorted with rage. "You spineless coward!" she shouted. "After everything we planned—" The outburst seemed to confirm everything Marcus had just testified. Judge Michaels banged her gavel. "Mrs. Dawson Patterson, control yourself, or I will have you removed from my courtroom." Audrey sank back into her seat, seething while her parents looked mortified. After a brief recess, Judge Michaels returned to deliver her ruling. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, this court denies the guardianship petition filed against Olivia Patterson. The court recognizes Mrs. Patterson as fully competent to manage her affairs and assets. A wave of relief washed over Olivia, but the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, due to evidence of potential fraud and elder abuse, this court refers this case to the district attorney for investigation. The court also issues a temporary restraining order, preventing Audrey Dawson Patterson and her parents from approaching Mrs. Patterson or her property. She struck her gavel with finality. Court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, as reporters gathered, Olivia noticed Marcus standing apart from the crowd, looking lost. Despite everything, her heart ached for her son. "Raymond," she said quietly, "I need a moment with Marcus." Raymond nodded, understanding. "Take your time. I'll handle the press." Olivia approached Marcus slowly. When he saw her coming, he straightened as if preparing himself for justified anger. "Thank you," she said simply, "for telling the truth today." He shook his head, eyes glistening. "It was the least I could do. Too little, too late." "It's a start," she replied. Then after a pause, "What will you do now?" Marcus looked toward where Audrey was gesticulating furiously to her parents and attorney. "I don't know. My marriage is probably over. Our finances are a disaster. I've betrayed the one person who's always been there for me." Olivia felt the wall she'd built around her heart begin to crack. This was still her son, however misguided he'd been. "Come for dinner next Sunday," she said. "Just you. We can talk." He looked at her in surprise, a flicker of hope crossing his face. "I don't deserve that." "Probably not," she agreed. "But you're still my son, and we both need time to figure out what comes next." Before he could respond, Audrey spotted them talking and stormed over her designer heels, clicking aggressively on the pavement. "How dare you?" she hissed at Marcus. "After everything my parents and I have done for you." Olivia stepped slightly in front of her son, facing her daughter-in-law directly. "Audrey, the restraining order the judge just issued applies right now. You need to step away." Audrey's eyes widened in outrage, but a courthouse security officer was already approaching, having noticed the confrontation. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to move along," he said firmly to Audrey. With a final venomous glare at both of them, Audrey stalked away to rejoin her parents, who were already retreating to their car. Marcus looked at Olivia with new respect. "You've changed, Mom." She considered this. "Not changed, just found my voice again." In the weeks that followed, Olivia's life took unexpected turns. The local newspaper ran a feature on her case focusing on the broader issue of elder financial abuse. Dr. Foster invited her to speak at a symposium on elder rights at Savannah State University. Several women from her church approached her privately, sharing similar experiences with adult children or in-laws pressuring them about their homes or finances. Olivia found herself becoming a reluctant spokesperson for an issue she'd never intended to champion. But each time she shared her story, other women, particularly women of color, her age, nodded in recognition and sometimes found the courage to share their own. One rainy Thursday afternoon, she invited several of these women to her home for tea. What began as casual conversation evolved into something more purposeful. By evening, they had decided to meet regularly, forming what they jokingly called the Seasoned Voices, a support group for elders facing financial pressure or exploitation from family members. Vanetta offered her financial expertise. Gladys, who had worked in social services before retiring, knew the community resources available. Dr. Foster agreed to attend occasionally to provide professional guidance. As for Marcus, he came to Sunday dinner as invited. The conversation was stilted at first, weighted with all that had happened. But gradually, as they shared memories of Charles and reflected on happier times, the tension began to ease slightly. "I've moved out of the apartment," Marcus told her as they washed dishes together after the meal. "I'm renting a room from a colleague until I figure things out." "And Audrey," he sighed, "we're separated. Her father's attorney is handling the divorce. They're keeping it quiet because of the fraud investigation. Olivia nodded, passing him a plate to dry. What about your debts? I've been honest with the bank about my situation. They've worked out a payment plan. It'll take years, but... He shrugged. It's my mess to clean up. She studied her son's face thinner now, with new lines of stress and humility. Your father would be proud of you for facing this head-on. Marcus looked startled, then grateful. You think so? Charles always said the measure of a man isn't avoiding mistakes, it's how he handles them once they're made. It was a beginning, fragile, tentative, but real. 3 months after the court hearing, an unexpected development occurred. Olivia received a certified letter from an attorney she didn't recognize. Inside was notification that Audrey's parents were offering a settlement. They would pay back the wedding costs Olivia had covered and provide a written apology for their actions if she would agree not to participate in the district attorney's fraud case against them. Olivia brought the letter to Raymond, who read it with raised eyebrows. They're scared, he said. The DA must have a strong case. Richard Dawson has business interests that could be severely damaged by fraud charges. What should I do? Raymond considered. That's entirely your decision, Olivia. You could accept the settlement and put this behind you. Or you could proceed with the case, which might result in more severe consequences for them, but would also drag on for months. Olivia thought about the women in her support group, about the stories she'd heard of elders pressured and manipulated by family members. If Audrey's parents faced no real consequences, would they simply try similar tactics with someone else more vulnerable? I need to think about it, she told Raymond. That night she wrote in her journal, weighing the options. Pursuing the case would mean prolonging the conflict, keeping the wounds fresh. Accepting the settlement would allow her to move forward more quickly. But what about justice? What about deterrence? The next morning she woke early and sat on her porch watching the sunrise. The answer came to her with surprising clarity. She called Raymond. I'll accept their financial restitution, but I want something more meaningful than an apology letter. What did you have in mind? I want Richard Dawson to make a substantial donation to the Savannah Elder Protection Coalition, and I want them to attend an educational session on elder financial abuse, not as punishment, but as education. Raymond was silent for a moment. That's surprisingly merciful, Olivia. Not merciful, strategic. Money means nothing to them, but public accountability might actually change something. To her surprise, the Dawsons agreed to her terms. Richard made a $100,000 donation to the coalition and, looking distinctly uncomfortable, attended a workshop led by Dr. Foster. Whether it changed their hearts remained to be seen, but it set a precedent that Olivia hoped might benefit others. 6 months after the court hearing, life had settled into a new normal. Audrey had moved back to Atlanta after the divorce was finalized. Marcus had found a more affordable apartment and was steadily paying down his debts. He came to dinner every other Sunday, their relationship slowly healing through honest conversation and shared memories of Charles. The Seasoned Voices group had grown to 15 regular members meeting weekly in Olivia's living room. They shared resources, strategies, and support. Sometimes they simply provided a sympathetic ear for stories that needed telling. On a bright October afternoon, Olivia decided to host a garden gathering for the group. The azaleas were in full bloom, and the weather was perfect warm sunshine tempered by a gentle breeze. She set up tables under the old oak tree, covered them with colorful cloths, and prepared a simple buffet of Southern comfort foods. As her guests arrived, Olivia felt a sense of amazement at how much had changed in a year. From isolation and silent endurance, she had found her way to community and purpose. Raymond came with his wife, a gracious woman who immediately offered to help arrange the food. Dr. Foster brought informational pamphlets about a new elder rights initiative at the university. Vanetta arrived with a surprise, a young web designer who had volunteered to create a website for their group, extending their reach beyond Savannah. Marcus came too, bringing a potted azalea as a gift. "For your garden, Mom," he said, placing it carefully beside the steps. "Dad always said you could make anything grow." Gladys Williams brought her sister, who had recently moved in with her after facing similar pressure from her son-in-law about her condo in Florida. 2 women from Olivia's church came along with 3 others they had referred. The most surprising guest was Caroline Jenkins, Olivia's former colleague, who had testified about her forgetfulness. She arrived looking nervous, a homemade pound cake in her hands. "I hope I'm welcome," she said hesitantly. "I wanted to apologize for what happened in court. Audrey approached me, twisted my words. I never meant to hurt you, Olivia." Olivia took the cake, then surprised Caroline with a gentle hug. "We all make mistakes, Caroline. Come join us." As everyone gathered around the tables, Pastor Johnson offered a blessing that spoke of wisdom earned through experience of voices too long unheard of, communities strengthened when all members were valued. During the meal, conversations flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and occasional tears as stories were shared. Olivia observed it all with quiet satisfaction, not just the healing of old wounds, but the creation of something new and vital. One of the newest members, a woman in her 70s named Eleanor, raised her glass. To Olivia, who showed us that speaking up isn't just for the young. Laughter and agreement rippled around the tables. Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "I didn't set out to start a movement," she said. "I just wanted to keep my home." Sometimes the most powerful changes begin with the simplest needs, Dr. Foster observed. The need for safety, for dignity, for home. Olivia nodded, thinking of how far she had come from that humiliating moment at Marcus's wedding when wine had been thrown in her face and she had felt utterly alone. "My husband Charles used to say, 'A house is made of walls and beams. A home is made of love and dreams,'" she told them. "For too long I thought preserving this house meant preserving our home, but I've realized our true home exists in the values we live by, the truth we speak, and the people we surround ourselves with." She raised her glass. "To all of you who have become part of my home." After the meal, as guests mingled in small groups throughout the garden, Olivia found herself standing beside Marcus near Charles's prized rose bushes, which were enjoying a vibrant autumn bloom. "Do you remember when Dad taught you how to prune these?" she asked. "You must have been about 9. Marcus smiled at the memory. "I was so scared I'd kill them. But Dad said sometimes cutting back was necessary for new growth." Olivia touched a perfect crimson bloom. "He was right about so many things." "Mom," Marcus said hesitantly, "I've been offered a job in Charleston. Better pay, fresh start, but it would mean moving away." She looked at him, surprised by the mix of emotions his words triggered. Part of her wanted him close to continue rebuilding their relationship. Another part recognized that perhaps they both needed space to grow in new directions. "What do you think you should do?" He considered carefully. "I think I need to stand on my own for a while, prove to myself that I can make it without depending on anyone else, but I'm worried about leaving you." Olivia gestured toward the gathering. "Does it look like I'm alone?" Marcus smiled, relief evident in his expression. "No, it looks like you've found your tribe. Besides," she added, "Charleston isn't so far. We have phones and weekends." "You're sure?" She nodded. "Charles and I raised you to fly Marcus, not to stay in the nest forever." He hugged her, then a real embrace without reservation or tension. It felt like another step in their healing, the acknowledgement that they could be separate, but still connected, independent, but still family. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, each thanking Olivia warmly, she felt a profound sense of completion. Not an ending, but a transition to something new. Later that night, after everyone had gone, Olivia stood in her garden under a canopy of stars. The same stars that had witnessed her tears now witnessed her strength. The same house that had nearly been taken from her now served as a gathering place for voices too long silenced. She thought of the women who would come to her next week seeking guidance, sharing stories, finding their power. She thought of Marcus preparing to build a new life based on hard-earned wisdom. She thought of Charles, whose wisdom continued to guide her even in his absence. And she thought of herself not as she had been a widow living quietly in a house filled with memories, but as she had become a woman who had discovered that age brought not invisibility, but clarity, not weakness, but a different kind of strength. The wind rustled through the oak tree, seeming to whisper encouragement. Olivia smiled, breathing in the scent of roses and rich earth. "I hear you," she said softly to the wind, to Charles, to her own heart. "And I am not afraid." She turned and walked back into the house, her house closing the door gently behind her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new possibilities, and Olivia Patterson would meet them all with the quiet confidence of a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she stood for. The storm had passed, and in its wake something unexpected had bloomed, not just survival, but transformation. 1 year after the court hearing, Olivia received an invitation that took her by surprise, a request to deliver the commencement address at Savannah State University's spring graduation. The dean of social work, who had heard her speak at Dr. Foster's symposium, believed her story would inspire the graduating class. Initially, Olivia declined. "I'm not a professional speaker," she told Dr. Foster when she called to encourage her. "Surely they want someone more distinguished." "Olivia," Dr. Foster replied, "sometimes the most powerful voices are those that speak from lived experience rather than academic credentials. These students are entering professions where they'll work with vulnerable populations. Your journey could teach them more than any textbook." After much consideration and encouragement from her support group, Olivia accepted. For weeks she worked on her speech, drawing from the stories she'd heard in her living room, from her own experience, and from Charles's wisdom that continued to guide her. The day of commencement arrived warm and bright. Olivia sat on the stage among university officials and honorary guests, watching proud families fill the auditorium. Marcus had driven down from Charleston for the occasion and sat in the front row with Vanetta, Gladys, and Raymond. When the dean introduced her, highlighting her work with seasoned voices and her advocacy for elder rights, Olivia approached the podium with surprising calm. She looked out at the sea of young faces, the future teachers, social workers, nurses, and counselors who would shape their communities. "1 year ago," she began, "I stood in a courtroom fighting for something most of you take for granted, the right to make my own decisions, to live in my own home, to control my own destiny. Not because I lacked capacity, but because others saw me as diminished by age." She spoke of the silencing that often comes with growing older, especially for women of color. She spoke of the courage required to reclaim one's voice after years of accommodation. She spoke of the community that can arise from shared struggle. "My late husband used to say that true education isn't about acquiring knowledge, but about developing wisdom to use that knowledge justly," she told them. "As you leave this university, remember that the people you will serve, whether elderly, disabled, marginalized, or vulnerable, don't need your pity. They need your respect for their autonomy and your recognition of their inherent dignity." She concluded with words that had become a mantra for her support group. "Your voice matters at every age, your dignity is non-negotiable, and your story deserves to be heard." The standing ovation that followed moved her deeply. But more meaningful were the conversations afterward, students sharing stories of grandparents facing similar situations, faculty members proposing collaborations, community leaders offering support for seasoned voices. Later that evening, as she and Marcus shared a celebratory dinner at her favorite restaurant overlooking the Savannah River, he raised his glass in toast. "To the most courageous woman I know," he said. "Mom, I'm so proud of you." Olivia smiled, remembering all the times she had said those same words to him throughout his childhood. Life had come full circle in unexpected ways. "Your father always believed I had more strength than I knew," she replied. "It just took me 70 years to prove him right." As the sun set over the river, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson, Olivia felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been painful, the losses real. But what she had gained, her voice, her purpose, her community, and in a different way her son, made the struggle worthwhile. The house at the end of the street still stood filled with memories of Charles and their life together. But now it also hummed with new energy, the conversations of women finding their power, the plans for expanding their advocacy, the simple joy of a life fully lived. Olivia Patterson had faced the storm and emerged not just intact, but transformed. And in that transformation, she had discovered that the final chapters of her story might be the most meaningful of all.